Good morning, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with a hurricane outlook and discussion recorded on June 16th, 2023, occurred on 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Today, we have a lot to talk about, including early and rare tropical cyclone development that is expected across the main development region. So what should you expect for next week? So let's go ahead and jump straight into everything. Taking a wide look across the tropical Atlantic this morning, it is still relatively quiet across the basin, at least for the time being. We notice that first thing, we still have a lot of dry, stable air in the middle troposphere here, in the middle levels of the atmosphere. That's the troposphere. Right here, located over the central main development region, but this is beginning to slowly filter out and replace itself with moist air from a tropical wave that is located here that has just moved off the coast of Africa during the course of yesterday and is now going to be traversing the MDR throughout the next several days, where subsequent development of this wave is probable at this point. So we'll be talking more in detail about that, because this could pose some implications for the Lesser Antilles over the next several days. So taking a look here at the tropical weather outlook issued as of 8 a.m. this morning, we notice that this is the tropical wave down here now with a 50% chance of tropical cyclone formation over the next 7 days, as the system will cross the tropical main development region very early for this time of the year, and then we'll begin to approach the Antilles here within about the next 7 to 10 days, where there could be some potential impacts down here across this area. And we're going to talk about this more in detail here in just a second, but just to give you an idea, this wave now at a 50% chance, so coin flip basically, over the next 7 days. And real quickly, in the Eastern Pacific Basin, although there's not too much going on, the one system now is gone. This system, though, disturbance 1, 30% chance of tropical cyclone formation, although this system poses no threat to land, so we're not going to really be discussing that in today's video. So looking at the visible satellite imagery for this tropical wave, we notice that we'll go ahead and pause it at the end of this loop. First of all, we have a couple of things to notice. First of all, we notice the dry, stable air where my cursor is all throughout the north of this system. And that is a response due to the Saharan air layer being present out across here and the dry subtropical nature of the atmosphere further towards the north as you get away from the moisture sources of the tropical regions. But irregardless, this wave has a nice area of shower and thunderstorm activity, sort of protecting it from some of this more dry, stable air. And we can kind of see that throughout the day today, if we kind of just move this back and forth, this really hasn't changed all that much. And we'll actually take a look here at the water vapor satellite imagery again. And you notice, again, this has a fairly nice pocket of moisture to work with at this given point. So all those dry, stable air off towards the north really won't be impacting this system too much, at least in the time being, as it traverses the MDR. And of course, water temperatures get warmer the further west you go as well. So what we're looking at here is the GFS 850 millibar vorticity, or the spin in the atmosphere at roughly 5,000 feet off the ground. And overlaid here is the 300 millibar wind, so at 25,000 feet, we're looking at the upper level flow and also the mean sea level pressure in the contours here. So this starts out as of this morning. We notice the little bit of energy down here coming off the coast of Africa. This is our tropical wave where my cursor is right here. And we go ahead and we move this forward over the course of tomorrow, and this starts to interact with the monsoon trough down here. And you start to get a flare up of not only convection, but also vorticity, as these thunderstorms help to generate the spin needed with the incipient mid-level vortex. There's already mid-level spin associated with the system, albeit weak. Once it gets down here and interacts with the monsoon trough, it will only help to amplify that spin in the mid levels. And what that is going to do then in several days is this starts to coalesce into an organized cyclone within just approximately about 2 to 3 days, according to the GFS forecast. Now, what's going to be steering this storm, at least initially, got a big ridge of high pressure towards the north at this point, And the storm is at fairly low latitudes and it's fairly weak at this point, so it's going to continue to get pushed towards the west throughout the next about 4 to 5 days. Now, as the system becomes stronger here, this is the 19th going into this weekend and into early next week. We'll have to watch to see if this ridge begins to break down and slide off towards the east. And as it does so, this system attempts to gain intensity down here in the MDR. And in fact, on this forecast guidance, this brings it to strong tropical storm force here by the 21st. And because it's now stronger, subsequently, this gets ejected further towards the north at this point, and we see it become a full-blown hurricane here on the 23rd, while taking this escape route out to sea with relatively somewhat lower shear in this area. Now, as we'll talk about here in a second, the strength of this system is going to play a big role in terms of where this goes, because a weaker system would be more apt to affect the Lesser Antilles. And we're going to go ahead and talk about those factors right now. So right now we're looking at the GFS forecast. We're looking at the mid-level relative humidity. So all of these browns in here, this indicates dry, stable air, and all of the greens subsequently are moist air. So again, dry air, and you got moist air down here where our tropical system is currently placed at. So this is beginning here roughly about late tonight. So this is 8 p.m. tonight and going into the day tomorrow. This tropical wave continues to move out, and the environment, at least immediately surrounding it, is fairly moist. This is a GFS box sounding for 48 hours from now, valid on June 18th at 6 a.m. or not 6 a.m. at 2 a.m. 6Z. And we notice that it is fairly moist throughout an entire depth of the column. There's not a whole lot of dry air that would be easily transported down to the surface, and relatively low shear in the low to mid and even upper levels. There's no change with height, or no change of direction with height, and very little change of speed with height. So that is a very good sign to allow these thunderstorms to build straight vertically and allow that latent heat release to basically allow for the heat engine of a tropical cyclone to basically build. As we all know, the hurricanes get their energy source from the water because it is able to help with latent heat release. And so we need a very moist column. We have that low shear, so these, the heat is not distributed over a large area. It's centered closer to where the low pressure is, the area of lower pressure, and that helps to draw in more moisture and allow for these, storms to then be, self-sustaining. However, if we go back here and look in the next few days, this is where we're going to start to run into the problem. Now, the forecast guidance here develops a tropical storm here within about 90 hours. This is by 8 p.m. On Monday. And we have a tropical storm here, 1,004 millibars on the forecast guidance. But we notice that as this system begins to increase its kind of feel in the atmosphere, and its surrounding environment now starts to get a little bit more entrained into this cyclone. And we notice here within 90 hours, we've got some of that drier air on the southern side being kind of whisked around. If we go to the forecast guidance here for 72 hours on the GFS, we can already start to see some of that happening, where aloft you have a little bit of dry air that gets worked into the system. And if we progress even further out to 96 hours, even though this is a tropical storm and intensifying at this point, there is that dry air that gets entrained into the mid and upper levels. And what this actually does is that as the thunderstorm towers go up, they begin to collapse on themselves. And you have what happens typically across the continental US, where as these thunderstorms kind of collapse on themselves, they bring down that cooler and drier air from aloft down to the surface. So whereas if you look now at 48 hours from now, you have a relatively moist column it's not, you can't really get any dry air and cool air to be brought down to the surface. It just won't happen because at this point, this envelope of energy is very resilient to that. But if you look here at like 96 hours, the environment now and the cyclone becomes more apt to dealing with these problems, as also an effect of shear begins to increase across the region. So if you progress even out to day 5, even though this is a borderline hurricane, look at the dry, stable air out here. And these thunderstorms would basically be bringing that closer down to the surface and make the atmosphere work a lot harder to produce self-sustaining thunderstorms. So this has my concern because, again, it's not super dry, but it's dry enough that could cause some issues with the cyclone. And then even as it progressed out to day 7, this is a intensifying hurricane on the GFS, and it has worked out some of those drier air problems, but there is still some dry air throughout the entire column. So this is going to play a major role in where this cyclone is going to go, and I'm going to show you now how it is affecting the track. So what we're looking at here is the GFS ensembles, and we're looking at the mean sea level pressure. So all of these little red numbers that you see here, this indicates an area of lower pressure, indicating where our potential storm could be. This is 18 hours from now, so this is tonight at 8 p.m. We'll go ahead and run this forward. We notice even within 78 hours, there's a pretty decent kind of southeast to northwest spread here within the overall members. So you got some stronger members that are further towards the north. And as I said, this is what the operational GFS was showing, that the stronger members, the stronger the system gets short term, the further north it's going to be within about 7 to 8 days from now. But we notice that once we get out to day 5, there's an even larger spread. There's a lot of weaker members that are further towards the southwest here, and stronger members that are further back here, further towards the north. And what this would allow is for this ridge here to kind of abate, move towards the east. You get this trough that's off the top of the screen, and our storm kind of just follows the weakness in the ridge and turns to the north and harmlessly out to sea at that point. And then we get to 7 days, and again, you have an even larger spread, basically from the Antilles here all the way far towards the north. So there's really two camps where the cyclone could be, and even the European ensembles are in pretty good agreement of that. This is the 0Z European ensembles. Again, fairly large clustering from the Antilles and the USVI all the way out to the open ocean, with subsequently no threat to land. So there's a lot of different possibilities that could really happen at this point, and nobody really knows for sure. But it seems like we are going to have to watch the Antilles over the next couple of days. So again, just kind of a brief summary of what we're looking at. Who is at risk right now? We're looking at the northern part of the island chain, the U.S. British Virgin Islands, and potentially Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic as we progress forward. These ellipses here, these are all of the possible track locations. This is the ellipse of all of the ensemble members put into this graphic here. So we're looking at the European in red and the GFS in yellow. The GFS is a little bit more consolidated, with the mean of the members being somewhere in here for the GFS, and the European mean is just kind of somewhere within here. It's very hard to gauge at this point, but again, generally speaking, we have to watch, especially for our friends here in the northern part of the Antilles, the USVI, and potentially Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic as we progress into day 8, 9, and 10. It's a very long-range forecast, and there's going to be a lot of things that can change, but I just kind of want to give these folks here a heads up that there is something to monitor out there, and it is best just to keep on your guard. But at this point, there's nothing super imminent or super concerning that I am seeing. So with that being said, I do hope you have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. God bless. Take care. Of course, I am Michael O'Malley, and I'll talk to you guys again some more over the next several days.